Hey Pennsylvania, it's wine o'clock on Wine Time PA. Join Rob, Holly, and Steve as they explore their home state of Pennsylvania and all the wonderful wineries it has to offer. Each month, they take a journey tasting the wines of PA. If you're able, pour a glass of your favorite wine and join us now for Wine Time.
Welcome to another episode of Wine Time PA. I'm one of your hosts, Steve, and with me today are my co-hosts, Holly.
Hello, everyone.
And Rob.
Hello.
So for those of you that are new, we are just three everyday ordinary wine lovers on a mission to see every winery in the state of Pennsylvania, and we're going to share with you our experiences. Today's episode, we're going to be discussing Grandview Winery. And that Grandview is one word if you happen to look them up. They are located in Mount Joy, which is in the south central part of the state, kind of between Hershey and Lancaster. And they're open 7 days a week, but their hours vary depending on the day, so be sure to check ahead of time before you show up. Reservations are not required unless you are going to show up with a group of 6 or more, then best give them a call and let them know. We also did a quick visit in April of 2024, so we incorporated some of that information into today's podcast. But we also did a more recent visit where it was more structured and what we normally do specifically for the podcast. So, Rob, why don't you give us a little background?
Sure. The winery was started by Larry Kennel and his family. Larry liked making wine as a hobby and asked his daughters to join him in making wines. In 2009, they planted their vines on the family farm. They bottled their first wine in 2012 and actually sold their first bottle on Thanksgiving Day of that year. They started construction on their tasting room in 2011, but it would not open until January of 2013. The winery is still family owned today, but the ownership is now under Larry's daughter Sarah and her husband Scott. The grapes they use to produce their wines come from as far north as the Finger Lakes and as far south as Virginia. Spoiler, there's more on that coming later in this episode. However, they do have a vineyard with a unique soil from some of its neighbors, and it's a specific soil called Beddington that is shaly and well drained. They grow 7 different varietals of grapes on site that they use for their wines, and those are the Albarino, more on that later, Chardonnay, I think more on that later too, Cab Franc, Cab Sauv, Pinot Noir, Merlot, and Petit Verdot, but this one they only use for their blends. You won't see that one specifically on its own. They also note that they handpick all of their grapes.
Oh, I always think that's really cool when places handpick their own grapes. I don't know, just,
Yeah, I'm a little curious. Does it create more yield when you do it by hand instead of by machine?
Well, probably produces a lot more love in the bottles of wine to handpick it, but
yeah, it definitely takes more work.
Yeah. So let's talk about the winery itself a little bit. So it's located on a hill that faces the vineyard and the surrounding valley and below. In fact, that's where they got the name Grandview from because of the grand view that you get of the area around you. When you pull into the parking lot, you'll notice the building is a wooden structure with a metal roof, and there's this huge deck that actually showcases the view. When you walk inside the building, you'll be greeted by a host stand in front of you that you'll be checked in and you will be seated kind of like a traditional restaurant. Behind the check-in stand, there's a big bar area. Off to the left is a brick wall, and they've got a really nice display of their wine racks and bottles for purchase there. And slightly to the right of the host stand is a door for the deck. And I just want to note that to sit on the deck when you go during nicer weather, you have to purchase a bottle or a glass of wine. If you want to do a tasting flight, you have to actually stay inside while you'll do that. Now, to the right of that door and the stand is the indoor seating area where you can do those flights. And it's kind of a long rectangle-shaped area with tables and chairs. They're like the high wooden tables and the metal chairs. There's a couple lower tables as well. And they're on either way side of this like rectangular space with a kind of a pathway down the middle. And they did a really good job with the design because there's these big, beautiful windows that showcase the landscape. The ceilings are really nice and tall as well. They have beautiful wooden floors. I like that the walls are this kind of neutral color with some darker brown trim. They got some Edison style chandeliers. and some black and white pictures. Like everything is really well designed is what I'm trying to say. Like it feels very open and inviting with the windows and stuff. You don't feel crowded or claustrophobic. Overall, I think the place has a very modern and sophisticated farm style feel to it, but it's not pretentious. It's very welcoming, in my opinion, much like the staff. I was really impressed with the staff at this winery because they were really like not only kind, but knowledgeable and very passionate about the winery and what they were talking about. Like they really all seemed to genuinely love working there. And I want to give a shout out to Meg, who was our server on our most recent visit. She's awesome. Like Meg, awesome. Thanks for all the information that you gave us and great job.
Yeah, we asked her a lot of questions, and even when she didn't know, she ran away, got that answer, and came right back. It was spectacular.
And it was fairly busy that day too, so the fact that she took the time to answer our questions like that was really nice. So thanks, Meg.
Yeah.
The winery also offers a lot of event options, which we think is worth noting as you plan your visit, because we don't want it to like get in the way, but we also want you to be able to take advantage of these events. A lot of wineries do events, but Grandview really has a pretty structured schedule of a bunch of variety of things that they do. So Thursday evenings from 5 to 9, they do some sort of event. That could be trivia or yoga or craft, charcuterie class. They do a lot of interesting stuff on Thursdays between 5 and 9. So keep that in mind when you plan your visit. Also, from the months of May through October, they do a concert series where on Fridays and Saturday evenings from 6:30 to 8, they have musicians outside on the deck area, and they do charge a fee to sit out there to help cover the musicians' costs, but feel free to check out their brochure, see who's coming, and if there's a band that interests you, it may be a good day to go have a tasting. One Saturday a month during that May through October concert series, they also do a cigar night from 6 to 8:30. It's outside on the deck, and if you're a fan of cigars, it might be another good opportunity for you to show up and check them out. All these events are listed on their website, and their Facebook page is kept pretty up to date, so definitely check them out if you're going to go, just to make sure that it doesn't interfere with your plans, or if you're interested in attending these events, you know exactly when they are and what they're up to.
Yeah, that's great to know that some of these wineries have very structured events and regularly scheduled events. So yeah, definitely make sure you check their Facebook or their website ahead of time before visiting in case you run into something you don't want to run into while you're there and you just want to go enjoy some wine.
Yeah, or a less busy evening.
Right. As far as their wines go, during our visit, they had 29 wines to try. Those were broken down into the following categories: dry white and rosés, 8. They had 7 dry reds. Port-style wines, they had 2. There were 3 heritage fruit wines, 5 semi-sweet wines, and 4 sweet wines. For the tastings, they have flights that come with 5 wines. You can choose from 4 preset flights, or for a couple dollars more, you can custom make your 5 wines. You can, of course, also buy a bottle or a glass of wine. And price ranges from the bottle start at around $17 and go as high as about $36. They had 2 different wine slushies available as well. And if you're not into wine, they do offer around 11 different local craft beer options. And I think they also had some vodka sodas while we were there.
Yeah, I noticed that. The one thing I did notice too, like the first time we visited, there were a few mixed drinks on their menu that I didn't notice on this trip. And I completely forgot to ask if that was something they still do, or maybe it was just a seasonal thing. I don't know. So either way, just as a heads up, there may or may not be a mixed drink option. However, if you like mixed drinks and you're not sure about wine, they have a margarita wine that tastes like margarita. I mean, I was surprised with that. She said it was made with a Cayuga grape, but they put tequila flavoring in it and some other things. So I honestly think this is a great option if you're a spirit drinker who likes margaritas. Like, I couldn't tell it was wine, like, at first.
It tasted like the tequila margarita. I mean, I'm not a big fan of them, but I know that taste, and it tasted spot on.
Yeah. I was like, if you would have just gave this to me, I'd have been like, who gave me liquor? You know, like, who brought in the spirits today? I didn't order a margarita. In terms of non-alcoholic drinks, you can bring in your own if you want. I don't think I really noticed anything other than like a self-serve water station. In terms of food, I think you do get, I don't know if Rob mentioned, you get some little oyster crackers with your flights too, which I thought was cool. I like to have little crackers as I'm snacking in between my flights.
Nice palate cleanser too.
Yes.
Yeah. And you are allowed to bring in outside food. They have no rules about that, but they do have some options for sale. Now, it's not a huge menu, but they're solid options. Like they had cheese, crackers, a Cajun pretzel dip, a hummus platter. And I think the first time we went, we got that hummus platter and it was really nice. On this most recent visit, though, we got this like cheese trio with crackers, and those cheeses were some of the 3 best cheeses I've ever had. They were amazing.
Yeah, they were delicious.
Yep. And also, in terms of food, one last thing. On Thursday, Fridays, and Saturdays, they do have a couple flatbread options that you can purchase, but they're only available from like 5 to 8 o'clock at night.
All right, well, it's time to talk about the wines. This is the part of the podcast where we narrow down to our personal top 3 wines. And as a reminder, we are not being paid or endorsed by Grandview or anybody in the wine industry. This is all just our personal opinions, and we're just sharing them with you today. As we always say, drink what you love.
That's right.
Yep.
So, Holly, why don't you kick us off?
All right. So my number 3 pick is their Blossom, is the name of the wine. All right, so the Blossom is a semi-sweet white wine on their list, and it's actually made from the Moscato grape. It has lots of floral blossom notes in the smell that I also got in the taste, and some really nice citrus flavors. And I want to note, like, I could tell this was a Moscato, but it's not a typical Moscato. Like, there's notes in it that, it's a good thing that I'm saying this way. It was really unique. We even had to have the staff confirm it was a Moscato because we were kind of debating whether it was a Moscato or not.
I thought it was a blend.
Yeah, because there was definitely some hints of Moscato in there, but there was something else in this flavoring that just made it unique. And I really, really enjoyed it, and that's why it made my number 3 pick.
Yeah, and it may have made my list also. We shall see in the future.
Okay.
Yeah, it was a good wine. I had it somewhere around 4 or 5. Didn't quite make my list, but it was a good wine. But what did make my list and my number 3 pick is their Sapphire White. Now, this is a Niagara.
Yeah, and I'm just going to go ahead and say that doesn't surprise me.
No.
It's now Merlot and Niagara.
Niagaras are a sweeter wine that I'm very much coming around to lately in the last few months as we've been trying. And this, again, was made from the Niagara grape. So think of that white grape juice that you can buy in the store. That's what the Niagara grape is made from. It is a sweeter wine, and I don't often pick sweet wines, as you kind of said, Steve, but, Niagaras are one of those exceptions I make. And I just thought this was a great example of what you can do with a Niagara wine with that classic white grape juice taste. I don't really have a lot to say other than it was just a great Niagara. And this was one that should be a crowd pleaser for anybody who's maybe not so much into wine like the 3 of us, or maybe something to serve at a party or something. This would be a great option, and my 3rd pick.
Yeah, it's a solid pick. Steve, you have your number 3 pick for us ready?
All right. I am going to go with their Blushing Ambrosia.
Good choice.
So this is a semi-sweet rosé. The description says you get a lot of strawberry and raspberry, but I got the strawberry a lot. No doubt about that. But I also got orange, and it wasn't like eating an orange, it was really like orange juice orange.
Yeah.
And those 2 flavors just worked really well together. And in fact, one of the notes that as soon as I took my first sip, it just reminded me of a mimosa.
Yeah, I think I thought the same thing.
It was just nice and refreshing. And it didn't have the bubbles, but everything else screamed mimosa. It was something that I could just find nice and easy to drink.
Yeah, I think I remember I was saying I wanted to bring back the introduce brunch wines to to society in one other episode. This would be a good brunch wine.
This would be a perfect brunch wine.
It has a very mimosa feel to it.
Well, I'm going to have to cross off one of my honorable mentions now, because that was going to be an honorable mention for me, because I like that strawberry with the tangerine or orange flavoring in there. It was just really kind of unique, but really good.
Yeah, it was unique. I think that's why I liked it. And it felt a little lighter, so it wasn't like you were overwhelmed with fruit. It was just right. It was just right.
I mean, bubbling it up would be good for a mimosa, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, that would be interesting to see it as like a frizzante.
Yeah.
So I might as well start us off with number 2 picks, and it's the Blossom.
Hey, I think we talked about that already.
Great choice.
And Natalia said it's made from Moscato, so it's like no wonder I like it. But I wasn't sure that it was just Moscato. I really thought it was a blend. It was very floral, but it wasn't like too much floral. And it had those nice citrus flavors, and it had this really great orange blossom flavor at the end, which was kind of unique. Normally you kind of get that in the beginning with Moscato, but this was at the end, and it just sort of lingered on your palate. So it's just, yeah, I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, it's a good wine. All right, so my number 2 pick is the Grand Blanc. And this is a dry white. It's a very typical Holly pick. It's a blend of Albarino and Chardonnay. And I actually remember loving this on the first visit and bought a bottle on our first time. And I still really enjoyed it in this visit. It didn't make my number 1, but it was still a really good, solid wine. I got some notes of honey in the smell, but not so much in the taste. I thought it was really clean and crisp with citrus notes and a really great acidity. I actually think this is a great wine that you could take to a dinner party because it could pair well with a lot of dishes and be a crowd pleaser. In fact, not a dinner party, but one time we went to a restaurant with a large group of us, like Steve and I and some friends, and it's a place where you can BYOB. And I took that bottle with us, and it went over very well with the wine drinkers, especially those that prefer the drier whites and things like that. It was a big hit. So yeah, I do recommend checking it out, especially if you're like me and you like those dry white wines a lot.
Yeah, I thoroughly enjoyed this too, and I got notes of grapefruit as well. And I don't always like the very acidic dry whites. And this one was nice because it had a good bit of acidity, but in the finish, the acidity kind of tapered off, and it didn't leave that acidic feel in your mouth. Yeah. So it was just nice all around.
Yeah, I think that's the combination of that Albarino and the Chardonnay. The Chardonnay probably pulled some of that citrusiness out of the Albarino wine that you typically get, which, spoiler, more on that later. So for my number 2 pick, I'm going to go with their Crimson Quartet.
Yeah, that's a good choice.
Yeah, that's a good choice.
Now, as the name might suggest, it is a dry red blend of 4 different grapes. The Cab Sauv, the Cab Franc, the Merlot, and the Petit Verdot. It was just an amazing, full-bodied blend, very smooth, even silky smooth to drink. Just medium, right amount of that peppery spiciness in there. I got some hints of the oakiness from some of those dry reds. There was even some sweetness in there, like some cherries or maybe even a little bit of raspberry in the beginning, and not too much in the way of tannins. It kind of finished with a very light amount of tannins in the finish. And again, I know the 3 of us really like dry red blends, and this was just an excellent example of what you can do with a dry red and how you can blend them well.
Yeah, I thought it went really well together. I noted this as one of the dry reds that stood out to me that day. You know, I was very more like, dry reds were my thing more like 5 years ago. So 5 years ago, Holly probably would have picked this one, but Holly right now is definitely more into the dry white phase of her life. But this was probably my favorite red out of all of the ones that we tried that day. I thought that was a really nice blend.
Yeah, I like this a lot too. It was probably my number 4 overall. I remember we got a second sample of it because we wanted to dissect it a little bit more, and yeah, it was good just the second time around too.
Yeah, just really well blended.
Yeah. All right, are we ready for number 1 picks?
All right, maybe I'll kick us off with our number 1s here.
Go for it.
Now, this won't be a shock to either of you, but I picked the Albarino.
I knew you were going to pick that before we even got there.
This was one on our first visit I made sure to try. And on the second visit, I made sure to try it again because I really like Albarinos, and they're not too easily spotted in the wild. You know, I've been finding they're more in the southern tier of Pennsylvania's where these grow great, even down into like Maryland and such. But again, for those not familiar with the Albarino, it's a dry white wine named from the namesake grape, Albarino. This is one of their estate wines, so that means they grow it on property. It was a nice and crisp. There's lots of citrusy flavors. I got like grapefruits especially, which I really love that. But it was really balanced between those fruit forward notes at the beginning with some nice amount of acidity in the finish. This would really pair well with spicy foods or even like chicken, fish, really kind of versatile in that regard. And, you know, Albarinos are one of my favorite wines, and this one was no exception to that, and my number 1 pick.
Yeah, I enjoyed the Albarino as well, too. I thought it was really nice. It was, like you said, it was crisp. It was refreshing. I think it's a food-friendly wine. Yeah, which I think you said, I think everything that they said in their description is just, it's spot on. It's a solid one. And I think if you're not familiar with Albarino, definitely give this one a try. It's unique.
All right, so my number 1 pick is their Norton. And I have actually never seen a Norton before. So I was curious to try this and was not disappointed, obviously. So this is one of their dry reds, and it's single vintage, so it's single varietal rather. It's kind of a little outside of my wheelhouse. I don't normally like single varietal dry reds, but this one was just spectacular. It starts with this nice bit of raspberry flavor, but it's not like sweet. It's just like that pure raspberry taste. then it's like just really smooth as you're drinking it all out. Nice body, and it's got this beautiful dry finish. And it was kind of nice because it just felt like drinking a semi-dry because of that beautiful raspberry taste. But all told, this was just, spot on for me. Everything that I want, it hit.
Yeah, I've seen some Nortons here and there. They're not too common of a grape. And I wanted to do a little research on this because this is one of the, I think, the first Nortons we've really come acrost on our journry here.
I've never seen one before.
I remember you liked it too, so I'm not surprised you did some research.
I was debating between the Norton and the Crimson Quartet for my number 3 pick. I had the feeling you might have liked this a little bit more, so I kind of deferred you to this pick just because you don't talk about dry reds that often.
No, and certainly not for a number 1 pick. That's how good it is.
Right, and I can't argue against that, really. My 1, 2, and 3 picks are so close together. But again, this was a unique wine, as we mentioned, and it had a great dark purple reddish coloring to it. There was, again, that sweetness of the raspberries and maybe just a hint of oak and pepperness in there. But I wanted to bring some attention to the Norton grape itself because, as Meg mentioned to us there, it's a colonial grape. And that kind of piqued our interest a little bit. So I did a little research, and this is mostly stuff you can find just doing a Google search. The Norton grape is sometimes referred to as a colonial grape because it was one of the few varietals of grape native to North America. And in particular, it was cultivated near Richmond, Virginia by Daniel Norborn Norton. So he kind of named the grape after himself since he discovered it. And it's, again, one of the oldest native grapes in the country. He thought the seedlings were from a long-forgotten variety called Bland, though there is some debate on this today, but basically it's thought to be a wild native species of North America. It became commercially available around 1830 and was popular throughout the East and Midwest, especially Missouri, where it's actually their state grape.
Oh, fascinating.
I didn't know there were state grapes.
I didn't either.
I guess some states, it's not just, certain things they pick to be their state whatevers, and
I have to look into this now. Does Pennsylvania have a state grape?
Yeah, I'm curious too.
I'm curious too.
We're getting sidetracked.
So it's quite popular in the Midwest, Missouri, like I said, Ohio. It's really popular in Virginia, which is where it kind of, got its start there. Now, it has a lot of cultivating properties to the Concord grape, which basically replaced the Norton after Prohibition.
Prohibition ruined everything.
So during that time of Prohibition, winemakers obviously couldn't make wine when alcohol sales were illegal. So a lot of farmers switched over to the Concord just because of its more versatility. You can make grape jams and jellies out of it, or just simply pluck them off and eat them. So the grapes started being replaced. The Norton grapes started being replaced by the Concord, but after Prohibition, we're seeing the resurgence of grapes and vines and vineyards here and there. The Concord kind of took over as that main grape, but we are starting to see in the last couple of decades a resurgence of the Norton, especially in the East and Midwest, Missouri and Virginia being two main producers of the Norton grape. And it can also be found in blends, but it can also be found just on its own. And this, was a great example of how you can make a Norton grape into something really special and really good.
Yeah, and that excites me too, just as a new grape to try. But the fact that this one is made into a nice dry red, whereas I've had dry Concords and I don't really care for them much. They tend to be better semi-dry down to sweet. So this is, one to look out for.
Yeah. Thanks for doing the history of that. It was just interesting. Like, to me, I'd never heard of the Norton grape, and then she was talking about it, and it was cool. It was worth, trying again. If you're looking for something new, look at the Norton.
The first time I had a Norton, believe it or not, was down in Florida.
Oh, fascinating.
Interesting.
Wow, everywhere. All right, so I guess I just have to round us off for our number 1 picks. All right, my number 1 pick. I love this one. Won't be a surprise if you listen to past episodes, but it's their Gruner Veltliner. Did I say it right this time?
I think you did.
I just called the Gruner. So the Gruner is a dry white wine, and it's one I've mentioned before I really love. It's actually known in the country of Austria, which is something that you can get a lot from there, but we're starting to see it pop up more in our area. I've noticed in the last couple of years, it's really starting to make a surgence in our area. It's refreshing. It's well balanced. It's got great acidity. It had notes of tangerine in this one and nice grapefruit flavor. Honestly, it's one of the best Gruners I've had in a while as far as some of our wine visits. Not to, we haven't had some great ones. This one really stood out to me as being exceptional. And I do highly recommend this if you want to experiment with this grape more or give it a try. If this is one that you're not sure about, I would say if you're at Grandview, definitely put, the Gruner on your list of something to try. And I think that's something I've been kind of noticing a pattern as we're talking today. They've got some unique things you don't see elsewhere, and they do them pretty well, like the Albarino, the Norton, the Gruner, you're starting to see some of those. So yeah, anyway, that was my favorite wine. Loved it.
Yeah, the Gruner, that was a really good Gruner. I could easily buy a bottle or two of that and drink. It was really good.
Yeah, we did buy a bottle. I really liked it too, so it wasn't a surprise that we took a bottle home. And I will say it's interesting because when we opened it, it didn't quite taste the same. And then after it had a little bit of time to aerate and get a little, oxygen, contact, it changed back to that same flavor profile that I remember having at the tasting. And yeah, that tangerine and grapefruit, it just went together so well. It seems odd, but it was great.
Yeah.
And I don't normally like Gruners, but this one was spectacular. Yeah. And it's probably number 4 or 5 on my list. So
it's a good Gruner. And like I said, the flavors are they're subtle, but they're there. And it blends so well together on the tongue. Anyway, I could talk about it all day. There's probably some honorable mentions out there we need to talk about.
Yes, I'll start us off with the Sunkissed. This is a dry rosé. It has really nice citrus and berry flavors, and it kind of drinks like a semi because of those fruit flavors. And what I liked about this is I don't typically love rosés because of that indescribable flavor that I've mentioned before, but not only did this not have it, but I really expected that out of a dry rosé. And this was just really lovely to drink.
Yeah, it wasn't a bad one. My honorable mention is the Precious Pink. And it's a sweet wine, and it's a pink Moscato. So, I like the other Moscato, I'll pick the pink one. This one was a very beautiful, soft, light pink color. So the former event planner in me loves beautifully colored drinks because I'm always like, oh, I could use this in an event. Anyway, it was very light and mild. It had that sweet Moscato taste, but again, it was mild. It almost could use a little bit more fruit in it, but it was really refreshing. I think I mentioned that whole flavored water, if you like flavored waters and stuff, it kind of reminded me of that. So and that's probably one of those things that can be dangerous because it's so mild and refreshing, you barely taste the alcohol in it.
I'll shout out their dry reds, the ones that we haven't already mentioned, if nothing else, because they grow their own red grapes there.
Yeah, which is a surprise for Pennsylvania.
A lot of Pennsylvania wines outsource their dry reds from other areas, but
usually
California, but not always. And there are places, especially down in that Lancaster Valley area, where the dry reds can grow pretty well. But in particular, I'll shout out the Twisted Tranquility, which was their Cab Franc Merlot blend. Just again, another example of how you can blend reds together and make a really excellent wine.
Yeah, I think it's also funny that you were going to say the Blushing Ambrosia. Had I not picked it, that means all 3 of us picked a rosé as our honorable mention. That's sort of funny.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, they're hit or miss with me, and this one, that was a hit for me. So
yeah, they had some good stuff. We asked about best-selling wines. I think on our first visit, I can't remember if we confirmed this on this visit, but they basically said some of their best-selling are the Chardonnay, which I do want to give a shout-out to. I actually almost considered the Chardonnay as an honorable mention. I enjoyed this Chardonnay. I think it was a light French oak.
It was, because I really have come to the conclusion that I love French oak, and it was a good Chardonnay.
Yeah, and it had some really nice flavors in there that I really enjoyed. That I think that there were some things in there that you don't always find in Chardonnay that I really liked it. They also said the Merlot. Which Rob?
Yeah, that was a good Merlot.
Riesling are their best selling. And they said they also do a space on the property for weddings. So it sounds like those are common wedding wines. And again, as a former wedding planner, I can attest that those wines are served a lot at weddings. So that's probably why it helps in their sales. But they also said the Albarino, the Crimson Quartet, and the Norton are all very well liked once people try them. So I think that's kind of an interesting, again, go back, maybe try something out of your comfort zone.
Yeah, I'm one that's always going to recommend trying something out of your comfort zone. Definitely get the wines that you're gonna know you're gonna love, but try something different because you don't know when you're gonna find something that just surprises you.
Right. Take those custom flights. Get 3 of the wines that you know you like. Then pick 2 that are maybe something you want to try.
Yep.
In summary, that concludes this month's episode. We really enjoyed our visit to Grandview Vineyard and highly recommend you checking them out. They have a really nice selection of well-crafted wines in a really wonderful and lovely setting, and just a great and friendly staff. You can find more information on their website at grandviewwines.com. And if you haven't, please like and subscribe, follow us on our social media, and give us a good review if you can to help our podcast grow. Tune in next month as we feature another winery from our home state of Pennsylvania.
Thanks for listening to Wine Time PA with your host Rob, Holly, and Steve. We hope you enjoyed our take on Pennsylvania wineries and all that they have to offer. Please be sure to like and subscribe to this podcast. Also, be sure to follow them on social media for updates and news. Remember, when it comes to wine, drink what you love.